Hey guys, Canucks fan 91 here with my 2012 NFC East division preview. I'm gonna do it for all 8 divisions, yeah. So let's get started. I'll start off with the worst team in my opinion is the Washington Redskins. Sorry, Redskins fans, but yeah, you guys got a good team. Like your three linebackers: Brian Rackbo, Ryan Kerrigan, London Fletcher. Like there's a lot of teams with like two good linebackers, like the Ravens with Ray Lewis and T Sizzle. Uh, Bears with Brian Urlacher and uh, Lance Briggs. I don't want to waste the time and just try to think of other ones, but yeah, he's got really good linebackers. On the defense though, there isn't much other than your big linebackers. So like they lost LeRon Landry at safety and OJ. They lost both their safeties, LeRon Landry and OJ Togway. Um, I, 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 all I can name on the defensive line is Ryan Kerrigan. You know, they have D'Angelo Hall. Like, they have a decent defense. Like, they got potential. I think their defense is an above average defense, but they need to add more to their defensive line and secondary if they want to have an elite defense. On offense, they tried to add some receivers this year. They had a Pierre Garcon and Josh Morgan. They still got Santana Moss, and then they got their tight ends, Fred Davis and Chris Cooley. Like, they got a whole bunch of average players, maybe a bit above average in the receiving core. They have no one big, and then of course there's RG3. I think he would have a season like Cam Newton if he had a Steve Smith to throw to or someone like that. But his number one target is Pierre Garcon. Like, Pierre Garcon's a good receiver, but he was always a bit overrated because he played with Peyton Manning. Overall, the Redskins are a decent team with a tough schedule and tough divisions. I'll say they go 7-9 this season. Next up, we got the Dallas Cowboys. Another team that I think has a lot of potential, but the question is, can they bring it together? Like last year, might have one of the most talented teams in the league. Like DeMarcus Ware now added Morris Claiborne. I hate him, but Dez Bryant, uh, Jason Witten, Miles Austin, their new lineman Tyron Smith. Like, they got a lot of good players. I'll start off on defense. So like, you gotta start with. I'll start off with the defensive line. They got all they really have on the defensive line is Jay Ratliff. I think he's a really good D tackle. All they have on the defensive line though, linebackers, they're like the Redskins though. They got D Ware, and they're not as good as the Redskins actually. They got D Ware, but then the middle linebackers they got Sean Lee and I forget Brady James. I think is the other one. Like, they got good. Those two middle linebackers, they'll both have big years this year in the secondary. I can't name a safety on the Cowboys. I was thinking they were going to draft Mark Barrett until they moved up because that's really what they need. But Morris Claiborne still, he's going to be an elite corner in a few years, I think. And their secondary is improved, but I think they need to improve it a bit more. They want to have an elite defense on offense. They got an above average offensive line, I'd say, not a great offensive line. They have a few pieces on there, but yeah, that's it. Receivers, they got a lot of good targets for Tony Romo to throw to. They lost Lauren Robinson, but they got Jason Witten, Dez Bryant, Miles Austin, and the running back DeMarco Murray. And speaking of the running back DeMarco Murray, he had a real breakout year last year, and he'll have an even better year this year. I think he'll definitely be a 1,000-yard rusher for your fantasy football players. He'll be a really good guy to pick, I think. And then it all comes down to Tony Romo. I think, in my mind, you saw my top 10 QBs video earlier this month, hopefully, and I rated him a number 9. I think like people really underrate Tony Romo. Like, he takes all the crap in Dallas for choking and everything. When like I know stats don't say everything, but 100, his QBR was like 100 last year. That's any QB that has a rating that high should get some credit for it. Now I'll move on to second place, the reigning Super Bowl champion New York Giants. And I'll start off with their amazing D line. They got, I think they should trade OCU Manure for like I guess in the NFL there aren't too many trades. I'm a hockey fan. I'm used to straight up player for player trade, but in the NFL that doesn't happen that much. Uh, they should trade OCU Manure for like a defensive tackle. Like I think they have Chris Canty there, and that's it. But their defensive ends, Jason Pierre-Paul, he'll win a defensive player of the year, at least one in his career. He is going to be an absolute star. And then they got Justin Tuck, not bad himself either, and who I was talking about earlier, OCU and Ura, also a pretty good defensive end. And yeah, linebackers, they added Keith Rivers in the offseason. They still got Michael Boley, the other outside linebacker, and Chase. I think Chase Blackburn might be their starting middle linebacker. I'm not sure. In the secondary, they still got Antrell Rule, Corey Webster. I think they lost one of their corners. They're not. I think Aaron Ross. They lost him to Jacksonville. I'm not sure, but I think Prince Amukamara. I'm not sure how to say it. I think he'll start this year. He fell in the draft a bit, and he should be a really good corner in a few years. And yeah, so they have a pretty good defense, and it all comes from their defensive line. On offense, Eli also has a great array of receivers to throw to. Even though they lost Mario Manningham, Victor Cruz and Nakeem Nicks, two elite receivers. On most teams, both of those guys could be number one receivers, but I'm not sure who the number one receiver is there. Like Cruz got more yards last year, but I think Nicks might actually be the better receiver. Like I'm not sure because Cruz got so much attention last year for breaking out, while Nicks still could be the better receiver. I'm just not sure there. And then the running game, they lost Brandon Jacobs, but they drafted David Wilson. I think as a total player, David Wilson right now, he might be a bit better because he can be a receiving back. And they have Ahmad Bradshaw still. He improved a bit last year. I think he's a bit better than he was. Still not an amazing back, but he's still pretty good. Their offensive line, other than Chris Nee, it's a whole bunch of crap. And no offense to Giants fans. And then they got, in my mind, the fourth best QB in the NFL, Eli Manning. Like last year, that they surprised everyone by winning the Super Bowl, but they'll have a good regular season. They'll go 10-6, but they won't have like the same year they had last year. I'll go with a lot of people and say they might have been one-shot wonders. They'll go 10-6 and make the playoffs though. In first place, I got the Philadelphia Eagles going 13-3, which a lot of people said they would go last year. I said they win the Super Bowl last year, which kind of bad on my part, but yeah. So I'll start off on the defensive line again. They got another, just like the Giants, they got a great pair of defensive ends, Jason Babin and Trent Cole. Then they actually do have a defensive tackle in Cullen Jenkins, and drafting Fletcher Cox now. They got two really good defensive tackles. Linebacker. If they didn't add D'Amico Ryans, they have just horrible linebackers in Philly. Just horrible. But D'Amico Ryans will be great. And the outside linebackers, well, they get the pass rush from the defensive line, not the linebackers for sure. Then in the secondary, safety's kind of weak with Kurt Coleman, and I'm not sure who the other safety is. But then I don't think they should have traded Asante Samuel if they're even with all his problems. If they're only gonna get a 7th-round pick, Asante is still a really good corner. Just they shouldn't have done that, even though they do have DRC still. But Namdi and DRC, they're one of the best corner duos in the NFL. I think the Eagles secondary will be strong this year, and yeah, they'll have a top 10 defense. And in offense, I'll start off with the offensive line. They got Jason Peters, who's injured. They got my BC boy, Danny Watkins, Todd Hermans, forget this other guy who used to be a Bengal. Damn it, I can't remember his name, but you guys can look him up if you really want to know. But they have a really good offensive line, I think. Maybe one of the best in the league. Receivers, they got Deshaun Jackson, who's really questionable. Like he could be the Deshaun Jackson that we saw in 2011 or 2010, or he could be the one that we saw last year that dropped passes and fumbled all the time. Like you don't know with him. And then of course you got Jeremy Maclin. Like he's a really good receiver. I think he'll have a really good year. I think he'll probably get 1,000 receiving yards. And in the backfield, of course, you got Shady McCoy, plus Ronnie Brown, who probably won't do much this year, but Shady McCoy is just, he's one of the best running backs in the league. I'd love to have him on the Seahawks, so even over Beast Mode, one of my favorite players. Shady McCoy, yeah, he just adds so much to their offense. And then Michael Vick, I think he'll have a comeback here this year. I think Mike Vick, he's gonna have a really good year. Just he didn't live up to the expectations last year. The only problem with the Eagles though is Mike Vick is injury prone because he's running all the time and he's a 30-year-old man. I think the Eagles though, if Mike Vick doesn't get injured, they'll go 13-3. They're gonna have a really good year. But if Vick gets injured, they're screwed with Mike Kafka now. So this is my NFC East predictions for this year with the breakdown and everything. So be sure to subscribe for my previews for the 7 other divisions. Thanks for watching.